We've talked about the nerfs, now it's time to talk about the buffs, especially the ones not commonly told. Obviously, we got massive buffs to the melee class in the new update, but a few of the less considered weapons and tools have been buffed in this update to compensate for a large amount of nerfs, so let's talk about a few of those. Keep in mind this is not a comprehensive list, so yeah, alright, let's get started. The Bananarang and Light Disks were the only two stack boomerangs in the game. They were rather unique weapons, but due to their stacking they couldn't get prefixes. So they changed it so that now they are only one weapon, meaning they can get prefixes. Light discs were made 5 times more expensive to compensate, but the disc itself can now throw 6 discs. The Bananarang was made much more common, but it was also nerfed by 10 damage. Spiky balls are very useful in the early game, especially for stuff like worm enemies. They got a slight buff, so now they can hit an extra time when placed on the ground. This essentially gives an increase of 16% damage over the entire life of the ball, on top of the slight direct damage buff it received as well. The quad barrel shotgun had an interesting buff as well. It deals less damage but has more pellets, so it deals more damage but is influenced by defense more. The shotgun is also known for being insanely inaccurate with the 45-degree spread, which can be quite unfortunate at close range distances. But they fixed this in 1.4.4, since now one pellet always points accurately toward the cursor. Progress. For some reason, Star in a Bottle got a massive buff this update. It got a quintuple mana regen rate, but also reduces the cooldown on mana regeneration after using a weapon. This makes it more worthwhile to use in arenas for early game mages. This is doubly so considering how cheap it is, and since something like the Diamond Staff only consumes 18 mana per second, this bottle alone can recoup over a quarter of that at all times, which is pretty powerful. Many Hardmode weapons now use Hellfire and Frostbite, more powerful versions of their pre-Hardmode counterparts on Fire and Frostburn. This seeks to make their effects more relevant in hard mode and overall is a slight buff to damage. An example of this change would be the Phantom Phoenix to Hellfire and Cool Whip to Frostbite. Whips in general got a buff. With the increase of the enemy debuff cap, whip stacking has become truly possible for sweaty players looking to get the most out of their minions. Refer to Shy Guy Mask's video on the Blade Staff for more. Dark Harvest and Morning Star have got a buff to their effects, as well as Cool Whip getting tag damage along with a buff to its special effect. I'm definitely not an expert summoner, but perhaps the devs are aiming to change the playstyle of summoner with how they changed around the minion and whip meta this update. For example, Obsidian Armor got nerfed hard, but Tiki Armor now has whip bonuses. The Drill Containment Unit now has 3 times the speed, meaning it's actually worth it to use. I think Deceleration Mark II is still quicker and easier for digging out spaces though. Perhaps the DCU does give you more control than the Mark II, however. Crate Potions have been buffed by 50%, and the duration has been increased by 1 minute. This means doing something like this is much easier if you're doing a fishing playthrough, though now that Demon Altars don't spawn corrupt blocks, smashing altars is now a no-brainer in early hard mode. Still a QL reduction of grinding though. 2 other seldom used potions to get a buff are the expensive luck potions, which now last longer, and the bottled honey, which now gives the honey buff as well. The bottled honey can now be seriously considered as a healing item, as while it restores 20 less health than a healing potion, it's deadly simple to craft, and the honey buff grants an extra plus 1 HP per second as well as tripling heal rates. Then again, sometimes you need quick health and the honey buff can be gotten passively through a honey pool anyway. The luck potion is expensive, but remember that luck also increases your damage and defense through a rather complicated process discussed here, so it's not only a consideration for farming, but for fighting as well. Strange Brew has got a change, which is maybe not a buff, where it's now like a healing potion but more variable. You can either get very lucky or very unlucky, it's all a roll of the dice. Lastly, the Chain Guillotines got a 25% buff to speed as well as a 50% buff to range, making them more viable than before. I felt that they were decently obscure before, but hey, maybe I just haven't played a melee in a while. That's about it for a few of the moderately obscure buffs. These are definitely a lot less sweeping than the nerfs, but hey, they still affect the game in some way. Either way, if you enjoyed, I recommend a subscription, and thank you for watching.